Morning, everyone. I think that we've got plenty of materials to cover, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. I want to welcome everybody to our discussion this morning about resources for recovery for bar and restaurants. This is going to be the first video Zoom conference in a series of conversations about what businesses, specifically bar and restaurants, can do to recover from the effects of the pandemic. We're going to specifically talk this week about financial resources to fuel your business through the downturn created by the pandemic, and then also what you need to know as a bar and restaurant or restaurant owner related to just some basic leasing issues. My name is Tina Fischer, and I am an attorney and a co-founder of Fletcher Fischer Pollack, which is a law firm in downtown St. Petersburg. I'm also co-founder of Rising Tide Innovation Center, which is also a co-working space in St. Petersburg that is built to serve business owners who need resources to grow their businesses. Just a few housekeeping issues. First, Florida bar rules require that I tell everyone that everything that I say and the links that we're going to be providing today are not legal advice, and your participation in this Zoom call does not make you my client. If, as we're talking, you have questions, we ask that you go ahead and put them in the chat, and then we'll try to discuss everybody's questions at the end. If something's not working correctly, or if you can't hear me, just let us know via chat, and Jen Shaw, who is sitting right next to me, and she is our community director, director of community at Rising Tide, she will help us resolve those. In full disclosure, I'm very, very new to this online format, so I'm relying entirely on Jen to help me through this. So if we have any problems, I want to apologize in advance. Let's get started. Yep, you're up. Okay. All right, we're going to start with federal programs that are applicable to small businesses. By now, I think pretty much everyone's heard of most of the programs that are out there, but I do want to discuss each one of them briefly because they're all a little bit different, and if you take advantage of one program, you may not be able to use some of the others. The biggest challenge, I think, today is going to be figuring out which ones are best for your individual business, and this is going to vary depending on the circumstances and the facts surrounding the position that you're in right now. So we'll start with the Payroll Protection Program. It's a new forgivable loan that was developed to assist small businesses, help them retain their employees from now until June 30th of 2020. It's open to small businesses right now with less than 500 employees. Starting on April 10th, independent contractors and sole proprietors can also apply for this program. Each small business can apply for 2.5 times their average monthly payroll. So, for instance, if your payroll is $20,000 a month, you can apply for $50,000. The application form has a blank for your monthly payroll, and there are a number of documents that are probably going to be required, like your business tax returns for 2018 and 2019. And if you haven't filed for 2019 yet, just have a profit and loss statement for 2019. Your federal payroll tax returns for 2019, also your payroll report for the period ending February 28th of 2020, and your most recent payroll report. Proof of health insurance premiums that have been paid and other benefits that you've paid on behalf of your employees is also going to be required. If you need to get a statement from your insurer, you should just call them, and they can probably give you the last 12 months of premiums paid so that you can show that cost. The SBA website says that you can submit your application directly to the SBA. However, my understanding, and I think a lot of people have heard it in the news recently, is that they tell you to go through your existing lender, and that's great. A lot of people are trying to go through their existing lenders, but are having difficulties with some of the larger banks. I would suggest that you know, if you can't get through one of the larger banks, try one of your smaller local banks. Usually if you have an existing relationship with a small local bank, they're definitely more eager to help you, and it may work better for you. This loan is totally forgivable. You won't have to pay it back, but you will have to apply for forgiveness later on. So this is as long as you spend it on payroll. Business mortgages, rent and utilities can be paid for as well, but only 25%. So in order for this to be forgivable, you have to spend at least 75% of the loan proceeds from on payroll. You cannot lower your employee rates more than 25% from pre-COVID levels. If you've got furloughed employees, you still can qualify for the program, but you got to bring them back on the payroll by April 27th. So, as I said, up to 25% of these loan proceeds can be used to pay other costs, such as mortgage interest, rent, or utility. But if you use any of the funds in a way that would disqualify you for forgiveness, then you're going to have to pay it back. You'll have 2 years to repay that loan back, and the interest rate will be 1%. Keep in mind that no payments will be due for the first 6 months after the loan is approved, but that interest will accrue if you wind up having to pay interest at the end of the program. So the next program is the economic injury disaster loan, and this has 2 parts. It has the advanced loan, which is new, and it was just created for the COVID pandemic. For both programs, you apply directly to the SBA, and you can go to the SBA portal, there should be an application link right in the notes, and you should be able to find that there on the slideshow. The advanced loan program deposits $10,000 into your business account within 3 business days of successful application. So I have to say I haven't heard of anybody yet who's received their funds from this, and there's no real guidance on what the definition of successful application is, whether it's when you actually successfully upload the application, or if there's some other review required that you then qualify, and then that's a successful application. So we don't, again, I haven't seen anything specifically related to this, and I haven't heard anybody who's received the funds, so we'll see what happens with that. This it's completely forgivable, but keep in mind that if you also apply for the payroll protection program and or water both, the $10,000 that you get from the advanced loan will go towards whatever loan amount you're approved for in the payroll protection program. And again, as I said before, they'll both be, both the $10,000 and whatever the balance of the payroll protection program loan is, they're both forgivable. So the advanced loan, again, is an add-on to the existing EIDL programs. The SBA can qualify potential borrowers for this program. So you can expect that you will have to submit the supporting documentation for both of these loans, and also if you're requesting funds for operating costs, you also have to submit proof that you're going to be able to repay the EIDL loan, the one beyond the advance. You'll have to submit documentation that you'll be able to get some form of financing or have some income stream that will allow you to repay that beyond. And the loan limits for the program are up to $2 million, and the interest rates are generally around 3.75%. These are all great programs. You're going to have to basically evaluate your business to decide what's best for you. If payroll is your highest expense and the current payroll protection program gives you enough funds, that may be the best program to go for because it's 100% forgivable. If your biggest expense is rent and your payroll is lower, then you may want to go for the EIDL loan. particularly since it'll give you operating expenses over payroll. You can apply for both, but if you're awarded both, you've got to spend the money on different expenses, so you have to keep those funds, basically you have to track those funds separately and make sure that you can document at the end of the term for the payroll protection loan that you use them in accordance with the rules so it can be forgivable. So still talking about federal programs, you have to keep in mind that if you already have an SBA guaranteed loan, there are some other things that you have to think about. First, if your lender's been qualified as an SBA express lender, which means that they've been approved by the SBA, and you already have a relationship with that lender, then you might be able to get a bridge loan from a lender for up to $25,000 while you're waiting for your other loans to be approved. So if you have an existing EIDL loan from a previous disaster like Hurricane Sandy, Michael, Hurricane Irma, or Maria, you will get an automatic deferral of your loan payments until December 31st of 2020. However, you have to keep in mind that if you've got ACH and your recurring payments are automatically coming out, it's not going to automatically stop. You're going to have to go to the lender and ask them to please cancel those payments. Okay, slide 5. So the IRS has a suite of tax credits that businesses can take advantage of. The Federal Employee Retention Tax Credit is a credit you can take based on your payroll between March 12, 2020 and January 1st, 2021. The maximum amount that you can take is 50% of $10,000 in wages paid each employee, or basically no more than $5,000 per employee. In order to qualify, your business must have been partially or fully closed as a result of COVID, or you have to have experienced a serious decline in your gross receipts during the calendar year. You cannot get this credit if you take advantage of the payroll protection program, so you need to keep that in mind. And again, this is where you need to think about what's best for your business or financial situation. We've also provided links in the slides for these tax credit applications or information, and so there's also a link in there for the sick leave and family leave expanded rules under the FMLA Act. Basically, the FMLA is legislation that made specific paid leave mandatory for small businesses with 200 to 500 employees, and that have to provide for or care for a family member. And there's a link in the slides for an explanation to that, to those rules. And I just did that, a caveat to this, you really need to talk to your accountant to decide whether or not these are appropriate for you or which program is appropriate for you. The next slide. Florida has, let's see, so I'm going to go ahead and just kind of flip through this slide. We have Ingrid Sean Rodriguez with us, and she's going to be talking about some of the benefits that are available to service industry workers. So this is the unemployment portion of that, and I think she's going to address that. And if there's any other questions after that, we'll go ahead and address that, okay? So we are talking about the Florida Small Business Emergency Bridge Loan. This is a loan that is offered by the Department of Economic Opportunity for the state of Florida, and we've actually had this in existence since the 1990s. This actually kicks in when the governor declares an emergency or a disaster, and this activates the loan, and he activates the loan program. And it's a source of funds to basically bridge between the occurrence of a disaster and when other funding can be attained by the small business owner. The maximum amount of this loan is $50,000 if you can qualify. Qualifying requires that the business be established prior to March 9th of 2020. you have to have between 2 and 100 employees, and if you had any prior loans under a previous program, then those have to be, they have to be repaid in full. You have to demonstrate creditworthiness and demonstrate that you are going to be able to pay these loan funds back through other resources as well. The interest rate on these loans is 0% for the first year, but after that, if it's not paid back, then it jumps to 12%. Difference between this loan and the payroll protection program loan is that 1099 contractors do count as employees in this particular loan in certain circumstances. So this could be, this could be a good way to get the loan funds that you need to operate in the interim, while you're waiting for some of the federal loans to come in. Keep in mind that there have been a large number of loan applications received, so that's going to delay your processing time. You can apply for this up until May 8th of 2020. You're going to need 2 years of business tax returns, payroll tax returns, and individual tax returns for anybody owning at least 51% of your business. You'll also need to submit financial statements for the past 2 years and interim financial statements or profits and losses for the current year to date. You may need to submit additional documentation for monthly sales figures and an explanation if you have any irregularities in your credit report. If you need to provide any additional information requested by the loan committees, you have 7 days to do it, so you need to keep that timeline in mind. And you'll also have to describe your economic injury related to the COVID pandemic. There are links there in the notes to the eligibility requirements for this one as well. This also can be filed in paper form, online or paper. Okay. So this is a new one. The City of St. Petersburg has established the Fighting Chance Fund. Hopefully, I hope everybody has heard about this. This is for businesses that are located within the municipal boundaries of St. Petersburg that have been impacted by COVID-19. They're giving away $5,000 per small business and $500 to individuals. The application is open today. The total amount of funding under this is $6.8 million, and businesses who are applying have to have 25 or less employees and have to demonstrate an economic loss. They also have to have be able to show profitability for at least a year before February 29th of 2020. Again, this is for St. Petersburg businesses. So they did require a business tax receipt initially, but as of yesterday, they have eliminated that documentation. So I just haven't gotten a chance to fix my slide yet, so keep that in mind. But you do have to have a brick and mortar location within the municipal boundaries. In order to be eligible, you have to be a restaurant, bar or a nightclub, retail establishment, certain personal service businesses, and personal care, fitness centers and gyms, and event spaces and services. Okay. So the application for that is also attached to the slides. It's included in the slides, so you can link to that. There's also a math questions sheet. I think that's linked as well, I believe. Okay. If not, we'll put that on there. And if you have any questions on that, again, just let us know. Do you see that? Okay. Okay. So one other recent event that is important to note is that the Department of Economic Opportunity and Enterprise Florida have decided to waive the 2% guarantee fee for the microfinance guarantee program. So, so that's definitely an added benefit for anybody applying for the state financial assistance. So there are a number of private grants that you can look for. We've got a few listed on here. Let's see, the Verizon Small Business Recovery Fund is administered by the Local Initiative Support Corporation, which is a nonprofit that raises capital from national providers and grants or loans out the money in local communities across the country. Verizon is funding a COVID grant program, which can provide $10,000 in grants to small businesses impacted by COVID. The initial funding that was provided is $2.5 million, but they are looking at providing additional funding from some of the larger corporations around the country. So the specifics for this is that you would tune in every Tuesday and Thursday at 8 o'clock, 5 p.m. Pacific on Verizon, Twitter, Yahoo, Twitch, and FiOS Channel 501. They'll commit an additional $10 per use of their hashtags, and if you can use the hashtags, more money will be available. The first round of applications on this one is closed, but they are anticipating a second round around the middle of the month. And my understanding is that the application is relatively simple. Just asks for operating revenue and some other financial information, ownership, and business purpose. For women-owned businesses, there's the Amber Grant and the Red Backpack Fund. The Amber Grant offers a $4,000 grant each month for a woman-owned business, and then once a year, it selects out of the monthly recipients, selects one for a $25,000 grant. So the next cycle for this one closes on April 30th. This is supported by Sarah Blakely, who is the creator of Spanx. The fund will award, at this point, the fund will award up to $5,000 grants to women-owned businesses impacted by COVID. So Sarah founded Spanx using $5,000, which is where the basis of the loan comes from, and it all went into her business meetings, because she was carrying her red backpack, and so that's how she named her grant. The application portal for this recently was closed, but it's supposed to be opening again soon. The Hello Alice grant targets businesses owned by women, LGBTQ+, minority, and disabled business owners, and this is a $10,000 grant, which is a subset of the larger $50,000 grant per business. Two smaller grants. GoFundMe is giving a donation, matching funds of any business that raises $500 on their own GoFundMe page for COVID specifically, and Google is also giving its current ad customers some credit. I'm not exactly sure how that works yet, but there is no application required. I think you might just need to call them. So I want to go on to what specifically food and industry specific grants. Okay, I'm going to tell you that when I first started looking for these, it was not easy to find them. There's so much out there, it's very difficult to find things that are specifically for business owners. That being said, once you get to the right place, there's a lot of resources out there. So I'm going to touch on a few. So the first is the James Beard Foundation and Beverage Industry Fund Relief. This is providing financial assistance to small independent restaurants that have been significantly impacted by COVID and have an immediate needs for funds to set up for operating expenses and to keep from going out of business. When I looked last, which was yesterday, the applications were suspended due to overwhelming response, but the website does say that the foundation does anticipate that they will reopen and they will publish notice when the applications are open again. Dining Bonds, this was founded by a collective of restaurant industry professionals, and it's a national initiative to get money into the hands of restaurants right away, even if they're temporarily closed. The dining bonds work like savings bonds, and you can purchase a bond at a value and for whatever value you want to purchase the bonds at, and then there'll be an increase later on in the face value. So, for instance, if you want to buy a $100 bond for $75, for restaurants that need these, they can bring in some significant added revenue. LearnFromAChef.org. This is an online cooking class facilitator to help chefs earn income during the impact of COVID-19. It helps people find ways to connect with their friends, and you can sign up to be a chef teacher on the platform and get matched with students. Classes are conducted via Zoom, and the organization itself handles all of the logistics surrounding signing up and giving the classes. I found two great spreadsheets on Food and Tech Connect and Cooks Who Care. There's an ever-growing list on both of these with resources for restaurant owners and for service industry workers. So I definitely would suggest going to these two sites and checking them out on a regular basis and seeing what's available to you and what's open or has reopened, because as I said, a lot of these have been completely overwhelmed over the last couple of weeks and have shut down. So basically, you're going to have to wait and see when they open back up again. Most of them have said, though, that they do anticipate opening back up. Next slide. Okay, so this slide is basically specifically for service workers, but I have Ingrid going to discuss this specifically. So I think what we will do is we'll skip this for right now, and if there's anything in this that Ingrid doesn't touch on, we can come back to it and talk about it in a little while. Okay?
Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm Ingrid Sean Rodriguez. I actually live here in St. Petersburg. I am a director for the United States Bartenders Guild, the national organization, and I am also the senior steward of the brand for Whistle Pig Rye Whiskey. So I interact with bartenders and restaurant owners and bar owners every day of my life. I thank you, Tina, for asking me to do this. I'm going to share my screen with you guys so I can bring up my, yeah, there it is. So I'm going to talk directly to what is available for hospitality workers, both locally and on the national scale. I know a bunch of people have been on Facebook. There is a large group called Industry United on Facebook that has a lot of this information on there. Starting locally, I put a wonderful quote by our mayor, Rick Kreisman. You guys can read it at your own. But this is to go over again that St. Petersburg Fighting Chance Fund, which provides that $500 grant to impacted individuals. And I highlighted that word impacted because it is very important that people know exactly what's included in that. For instance, it has to be independently owned and operated within the city limits. If it's a franchise, it has to have less than 3 separate entities to be considered under this. So those employees must actually have those requirements on the business end in order to also to apply. They must be a St. Petersburg resident, and they must be terminated, furloughed, or have a reduction in salary of at least 50% after March 17th. That's the date that's being used across the board for this grant and for most of the grants that I'll be talking about. Going over again, at the top is actually the link for this fund. As Tina said, it did open up today. If you go to the main website, stpete.org, you can actually click on it. It's one of the first things that's listed up there. This is a generalization of what is included in those impacted businesses. As you can tell, they're all very small businesses that might be independently run. Some might be out of people's homes, but definitely encompasses a lot of the people that have been sitting at home waiting to do something and that are not able to now go out and meet with their clients on a personal one-to-one basis. I know personally the restaurant and bar industry, we were just told this morning that it's over 3.5 million people that have lost their jobs or been furloughed. And that's just based on numbers that they received on the 31st. The numbers are still coming in. So anytime that we can help anybody who's in one of these personal services will help everybody. I'd also like to comment that every single one of these funds that we're putting information up for are still accepting donations. So if people are interested in helping to support any one of these, please go to the websites that are listed and donate. Reemployment assistance. I actually just updated this slide while Tina was talking because there was some new news that came out about 45 minutes ago. As of yesterday, what they found out was that, sorry about that, guys. What they found out was that the website that was created did not interact very well with tablets and phones and other mobile devices. It wasn't able to support the different browsers that have come around recently, so it kept crashing. However, as of this morning, they have announced that they now have a mobile-friendly site. That is the site that's listed up there. If someone has already applied on the laptop, unfortunately, they will have to continue using that laptop site. But the mobile site is now up and running. As you can see, I've put in some of the versions that are available for people so that they can probably get through it a little more. One of the things that was really cool was that FedEx stepped up. All FedEx stores in Florida will actually print and mail applications for anyone who needs to get one. If people are still able to leave their homes, then they encourage people to go to FedEx to have that done there. They've also suspended the work search requirements or the need to complete Employ Florida from March 15th through May 2nd. That end date is negotiable right now based on how long COVID safer at home policies stay in place. One of the things that I know a lot of people are interested in is the CARE Act and how it affects how people will be paid during this whole process. So normally the Florida unemployment max rate is $275 a week, which averages, they're looking at about 55% of someone's take-home pay. So about $275 is the max. But with the CARE Act, everyone's going to be getting an additional $600 a week through July 31st. So they've also extended the normal 13-week cycle of unemployment, or in our case, reemployment, to cover all the way 25 weeks. The thought process is that by then people will have been able to find or locate or move into another avenue of work. If you're having a problem logging on, the recommendation is to log on between 11:30 p.m. and 4 a.m., which should not be too much of an issue for bartenders since they tend to work those hours in the first place. You may have a better chance of getting on your first shot rather than being held up in some of the jet lag that's happening caused by the servers being overwhelmed. Some of the other things that are helpful, if you need to send in verifying documents, I have put on there the email and the fax. I don't know most people that faxes at home, but if you do, there is a fax number for you to send in proof of employment and any type of verification that you may need. Now, going into some of the grants that are available, we do have the Above and Beyond Helping Hospitality. What this does is most of these have all existed before. What they've done now is just kind of added in a COVID response that is specific to what's going on now. So they're raising funds that are being allocated directly for COVID use, whether it's someone who has contracted the disease, someone who's been unemployed, or someone whose family member has been unemployed because of it. So the Helping Hospitality Fund is actually a $500 Visa gift card. However, it is not just everyone. You actually have to nominate somebody in order to be able to get that fund. Right now, they've actually given away 110 of these. So we encourage people to get on that site and nominate any coworkers, workers, employees, whatever you may have. Same thing as they're getting more money, they're doling out more money to whoever has been nominated and meets the requirements. Now, most of the requirements across the board on all these, the minimum requirement is a 6-month working in the industry in any form. So it'd be front of the house, back of the house. You could be a server, a bar back, a delivery person. All of those are included in the definition of hospitality worker for pretty much all of these funds that I have up there. CORE is very specific in what they're giving money to. So CORE is for parents with children who have actually been diagnosed with COVID. They're boiling it down to the smallest percentage as possible to make sure that those people get the largest amount of money that they can get. So if someone comes in and has been diagnosed and is either pregnant or has dependents at home that they're caring for that are small children, please direct them to CORE. CORE is handling that on a very large scale. Most of the suppliers, the major suppliers in the hospitality industry, have donated money to one of these organizations. I just realized the most important one is missing on here, which is the one I actually am part of. That was my fault. Another rally. Unfortunately, this application is currently closed. They are upgrading their back-end systems to actually help more people. But they encourage everyone to come back every Monday morning and see if it's open. Same thing. This is another one that's giving out $500 relief grants to people that have been unemployed or furloughed due to this. Same requirements, 50% or more cut in pay or time off or furloughed or terminated. The Golden Rule charity is specific in that it does not give money directly to an employee or a laid off employee. What it's actually doing is paying off people's bills. So if somebody wants an organization that will, if they have a mortgage bill or an automobile insurance or something like that, the Golden Rule charity will work directly with those creditors and help pay off those bills for the employee that is looking for help. And then the RERF, which is the National Restaurant Association, they have been set up for a long time. This is the same thing. They require a 1 year of being employed part-time or full-time in the industry in order to be able to apply for this. You have to be able to prove that you work there. So a lot of these organizations are asking for either a pay stub or a letter from the employer that's saying that they were furloughed or laid off. They're looking for maybe a tax return. So please encourage your employees to gather all those documents before they apply for these. That way it'll speed up the process and help everyone get what they need as quickly as possible. The one that is missing on here, and unfortunately I do not have it on the slide, but I will include the link in the chat and give it to Tina, is the United States Bartenders Guild Bartender Emergency Assistance Program. The Emergency Assistance Program has been around for about 5 to 10 years. It started in San Francisco. We normally handle smaller groups. For instance, we were right in the middle of handling the Nashville tornado survivors when COVID hit. So we have quickly mobilized to extend this out to all of the bartending and hospitality community. It includes everyone in hospitality. Same thing, back of the house, front of the house, server, managers are included in this one. Anyone who can prove that they've worked in the hospitality industry for over a year, and the year date that we're using is actually going back to March 1st. Since we're a national organization, a lot of the safer at home or stay at home policies were put in place in Washington State before March 17th. So we have rolled back our date to March 1st. It is a 3-part process in order to weed out any type of fraudulent activity, because unfortunately what we're seeing is that there is a standard of fraud in any type of grant applying process. And unfortunately, we're seeing that now as well. But it's still active. We are still accepting applications. We have over 360 volunteers throughout the United States that are vetting and screening these applications and that are going back to people asking for if they need any more documentation. But again, I encourage everyone, get your documentation ready early, get it uploaded, take a picture of it, do whatever you need to do so that you can process these applications as quickly as possible, and make sure that you're actually giving the people that are reviewing this information the right information to accept or deny your application. I have this for you guys. I can send it over to Tina and the organization to help send it out. But if you have any questions, we will do that at the end. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Ingrid. Go to slide 14.
No.
There you go.
No?
Oh,
Yep. All right. Well, here we
Hold on.
get going
One
again.
second. We'll get the slides back up. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So before we move on to Tom Harmon, I'm going to quickly go through a few other things. So what's going on now? The administration and Democrats are proposing an additional funding of an emergency bill for COVID-19 business and employee continuity and recovery fund is what they're proposing. It's going to be a streamlined version of basically a streamlined version of the 9/11 victims compensation fund. Few important distinctions, but it'll be intended to protect lost wages, preserve jobs through payroll assistance, and help businesses retain employees, support recovery by assisting businesses to maintain their solvency, and support women and minority-owned business impacted. Let's see, this is also applicable to 500 or fewer businesses, or it says potentially businesses of any size can demonstrate impairment by COVID-19. I'm not exactly sure what that means, but I don't think there's any business in the entire country that's not impacted at this point. So hopefully when they finally get this passed, it'll have a lot more clarification. It's supposed to have a 30-day turnaround initially and 15 days if you need expedited interim assistance. A coalition of lobbies, including ICSC and other groups representing hotels and tourism businesses, have written to the nation's governors, urging them to issue a 90-day rent abatement and eviction moratorium, basically nationwide, related to commercial tenants. The National Retail Federation has also made this request. Florida itself has suspended residential evictions to at least May 15th. But for whatever reason, our lawmakers chose not to go as far as stopping commercial evictions. So the Florida Restaurant and Lodging Association is pushing, I believe, a commercial moratorium in Florida as well. Thus far, the governor's office has stated that the small business owners and other commercial tenants would still have some measure of protection because the emergency order also suspended all foreclosure proceedings. So that's against both residential and commercial. Not sure exactly what real protection that offers us, but that's what they say as of right now. Next slide. So what I want to touch on really quick is your lease. Most people, I would say, have a lease. They signed a retail lease for the spaces that they occupy, but I would venture to say most of them probably either didn't really read it up front, or if they read it, they didn't understand everything, or they depended on an attorney to let them, to make sure that their rights were protected. So if you are in that particular, one of those particular categories, I would suggest that you get your lease out right now and you read it, because it's time. If you think you're going to have a hard time paying your rent payments, there are a lot of things that you need to be aware of. You need to ask, look in the lease, see how much time is left on your term. If it's about to end, you need to ask yourself, is it worth it staying here, or are you ready to move on? Did you provide a personal or a corporate guarantee? What happens if you do default on your lease personally? What happens if you just walk away? What are the default provisions in your lease, and how much is your deposit? How much are you going to lose if you have to walk away from your lease? So you need to, as I said, be very careful, and there are some important terms and phrases in your agreement that you need to understand. Terms that might apply directly to COVID-19, such as epidemic, pandemic, contagious disease, public health emergency. Do you have a force majeure clause? What about your commercial insurance? What was required and what do you have? Do you have the right to sublet or license use of the space? Go dark, default clauses, condemnation clauses. You have to read these very carefully, and particularly clauses about late payments and co-tenancy. Okay, so next slide. These are just some terms that and some issues you need to be aware of. Do you have a burn down provision, which basically says that, for instance, if you have a personal guarantee or a corporate guarantee, as your lease goes on, does your liability under that document decrease year after year? Force majeure is an act of God. Now, most leases have a force majeure clause, but recently it hasn't been helping people. The current analysis of force majeure is that it does not cover a pandemic. If your clause is broader, that's a better thing for you. You might be able to justify that it covers pandemic. If it's more defined and specific, it may not. Again, like I said, thus far people have just not been interpreting these clauses in favor of the tenant. Does your lease have a good debt clause? If it does, you may have the right to pay up to the current amount due and walk away. May or may not be in your lease. You have to check it. What are your termination rights? If you do decide to terminate, what does that mean? Again, security deposits. If you have a security deposit down there in your lease, and I'm sure most people do, and you walk away, the landlord's going to keep your security deposit. If you had to provide a letter of credit, the landlord will have a right to collect under that letter of credit. And even if you go through bankruptcy, letter of credits do survive bankruptcy, so you need to be aware of that. Again, letters of credit may have a burn down provision as well, so you have to look at that in your lease. If you're out of the space right now, are your utilities still on, and are you maintaining them? Do you have an obligation under the lease to maintain those utilities, and what happens if you don't? Look at your late fees and how they accrue. Is there anything you can do about negotiating that with your landlord to see if you can hold off on late fees? Keep in mind that if you are in default, the landlord can prevent you from accessing the property and can claim your property. Also, with regard to holdover, if you are someone or a business that was getting ready to move out of one space and into another, and you've been stopped from doing that, you are now technically holding over, and the rent in a holdover situation is generally increased by at least 1.5 to 2 times what you're normally paying. Sometimes it can be even worse. So, you have to look at that to see what you may be liable for there. Okay. Okay, so on the other end, there are often provisions, mostly in shopping centers and malls, that require that the landlord maintain a sufficient amount of occupancy in order to comply with the terms of the lease. So, in other words, they want to make sure that these commercial properties stay occupied. More people occupying the commercial property means that there's going to be more customers and more patrons coming to that shopping center or mall. So particularly with some of the larger retailers, they have some pretty strict occupancy requirements. So as people start vacating their businesses, landlords are running the risk of being in default of other leases, and because they can't maintain the percentage requirements. And retail vacancies, when it starts happening, it quickly sets off a domino effect, and before a landlord realizes it, half of their center is empty. And in this particular situation, they should be very, very concerned about that, because landlords have, on these big centers, they have loan requirements, and those loan requirements have percentages of occupancy that need to be maintained, and if they're not maintained, it's generally a breach under their loan documents. So governmental limits on hours of operation, is this a default on your under the lease? If you're not open and you're required to be open for a certain amount of hours, you need to look at that. So that could be a default on your part, but it could also be a default on the part of the landlord. For instance, if the landlord is complying with the federal government restrictions for being open, then you have no choice. You can't access your business because it's been mandated to shut down. So you just have to be careful to watch this. Okay. Okay, so what you really should do is talk to your landlord, talk about rent forgiveness, talk about maybe paying partial or getting a deferral. Keep the communication open. If you're having trouble or you know you're going to have trouble, get on it right now. And you might be able to renegotiate guarantees or, maybe even remove them. And sit down and look at your business structure right now. Financially, are you in a position where you can do cutbacks or maybe close parts of the business, other locations, just to cut back on your expenses at this time. So again, like I said, you have to look at your entire financial structure and where you're going. And you might consider getting professional help to negotiate your lease. So go back to the attorney that helped you when you originally negotiated the lease. You can try to do it yourself, and if you need help from somebody else, find a commercial real estate attorney. You can call us, or if you know somebody else, give them a call and see if they can help you. Okay, so I'm going to turn this over to Tom Harmon, and he's going to talk about business insurance income. Tom?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Tina. Hi, my name is Tom Harmon. I'm a trial lawyer here in Tampa, Florida, board certified trial lawyer, and I've got a boutique firm in here, and we do mostly catastrophic injury, catastrophic loss cases, insurance coverage litigation. But through my brilliant partner, Krista Collins, we also do a national class action practice. Krista was involved heavily in the BP litigation, and kind of as a result of that, a number of our clients, past clients, have contacted us about this issue that's in the news now: business income, business interruption insurance. What does that mean? Okay. There's an article, and I sent the article to Tina, and this is an article that was published in the Nation's Restaurant News. I guess this is what it looks like, and I've sent the link. But the basic story is this. The theme is, I went to New Orleans to pick up my daughter to pack her up from college to bring her home because of the coronavirus. We went to a nice little restaurant before we left, and I was talking to the owner, and the owner wasn't worried. She says, I'm not worried. After Katrina, we had purchased business interruption insurance, so I'm not worried. Everything will be just fine. Well, that's not what's happening. 100% of what I've seen, 100% of bars, restaurants, Ingrid can probably speak to this, they're all being told by their agents, no, you are not covered. I see Ingrid nodding, and it's scary because, in fact, even my law firm, we pulled our policy because we thought, yeah, we're lawyers. We have business income, business interruption insurance, and therefore we don't need to worry about it. And that uniformly across the country, restaurants, bars, everyone, doctor's offices. I represented a vacation rental company on Anna Maria Island, told we have no insurance. Why? Why are they all being told you have no coverage? And they're going to their agent first, and their agents have already really been told by the carriers there is no insurance. And the basic, the premise of this denial is that there's no physical damage to the property, and that a fundamental basis of business interruption or business income insurance is physical damage to property. And that kind of makes sense to most folks because everybody thinks of, okay, well, damage to property, that's physical force. That's a hurricane, tornado, flood, Katrina. And so the agent too kind of understands that from the insurance company. So, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. No fire, no flood, anything like that. But that is not consistent with the law. And that's what I've been talking to our clients about is there are clear examples in precedent across this country where there doesn't have to be physical force causing damage to your property to qualify for that business income insurance that business owners have been paying premiums for. Okay, there is case law on smoke from wildfires, unsafe ammonia levels, toxic gases from Chinese drywall. None of these things necessarily are causing damage to the property, but they are in a way contaminating the property. And that therein really lies the issue with business interruption insurance is, does coronavirus contamination, or because many businesses are being ordered to get out because of the fear of coronavirus contamination, does that constitute physical damage to the property sufficient that you're entitled to get that amount of money, be that $50,000 or $2.5 million in coverage that the insured, the restaurant or bar owner, has purchased. So I will say this, local governments, I'm hopping ahead of my slides here, I'm sorry, Tina. Local governments, Mayor Jane Castor is assisting businesses in this gray area of what constitutes physical loss or damage. And they're including language. Mayor Castor included language. And so I guess what I'm saying about it, there is hope. Mayor Castor, the city of New Orleans, Panama City, Key West, the whole state of Colorado are all coming out and saying that coronavirus causes physical damage to property vis-a-vis contamination sufficient to trigger coverage for business interruption. So let me say that again, it makes sense. The coronavirus itself is contaminating the property, or the fear of that contamination constitutes physical loss or damage to property sufficient to trigger coverage. Okay? Now, does that mean that the insurance companies are just going to roll over? No, They are not. We're still seeing flat denials. I've told my clients, just ask your agent to put in a claim, and the agents are coming back every single time with a letter saying no coverage. Okay. Now, I can go to the next slide. I'm sorry. So there is public policy and law that weighs in favor of finding coverage. And so every time I talk to clients or prospective clients, I'm saying, you know, I'm being positive, keep up hope. I do think we're going to win this. And the reason is why, or one of the reasons why is at the national level, I've learned this, the restaurant industry alone constitutes $1 trillion to our economy. 4% of gross domestic product is the restaurant industry. 15.6 million jobs. If there was ever a definition of too big to fail, it is our restaurant industry. They are too big to fail, and all the ancillary suppliers and everyone that's associated with the restaurant industry, liquor distributors, Southern Wine and Spirits, they are all related to the restaurant industry, and it is simply too big to fail from a political standpoint. Number two, the basic rules of insurance coverage litigation or rules of construction. I don't want to get too much into the weeds here and bore you all to death with law and case law, but the bottom line is this: when someone buys insurance coverage, they're buying a grant of coverage, a guarantee of coverage if something happens. That grant of coverage by law is to be interpreted broadly in favor of coverage. So they're not supposed to interpret it narrowly to try to not give you coverage. Opposite. The case law says that coverage is to be interpreted broadly in favor of the policyholder to give that policyholder, that restaurant, that bar, that vacation rental, that hotel company, to give them coverage. Okay. Exclusions are to be interpreted very narrowly and to be interpreted against the insurance company. The onus is on the insurance company if they're going to try to exclude coverage and say, no, you're excluded from getting coverage on this policy. That language is very narrowly interpreted, and it must be clear and unambiguous. And any ambiguity, if it's ambiguous, it is resolved in favor of coverage. So from a public policy standpoint, from a basic rules of insurance coverage interpretation, we're on the good side. The restaurants, the bars, everyone, the businesses that have been paying these premiums and are expecting to have coverage, you're on the good side of this fight, if you will. And I think ultimately they're going to prevail in whole or in part. Okay. Now, policy exclusions. There are really three types, or my clients kind of fall into three buckets, if you will. The first one is no virus exclusion. That is your strongest case. That is the business owner has purchased business interruption insurance, and in that policy, there is no virus exclusion. There is no exclusion for pathogenic agents, microorganisms, or anything that could be, argued is a virus. Okay, that is your strongest case. The second, if you will, step down, B-level case, if you will, is the exclusion never mentions the word virus. And to be clear, this is the coronavirus. It is of a virus. But you will see insurance companies, and I've seen letters where the exclusion is not just that there wasn't physical damage to loss of property, but the step down exclusion is, well, they have an exclusion for pathogenic agents or materials, an exclusion for microorganisms, an exclusion for pollutants, contaminants, and things of that nature. I think we will win that. I think that at the end of the day, once we get in front of judges if necessary, juries if necessary, that is one of those rules of construction that's not fair. You can't take people that have written premiums for years and years and years that need this coverage and now say, well, technically this was a microorganism. But who the heck knows what a microorganism is? And to try to get out of paying, insurance company trying to get out of paying because it's a microorganism, I think that ambiguity is going to be resolved in favor of the policyholder. Okay. The last one is the explicit virus exclusion. I brought a copy. This is, if anybody can zoom in and see that. This is the one the ISO, the Lloyd's of London, have published, and this is your toughest case. Okay. This is where there is directly an exclusion of loss due to virus or bacteria. It will be hard arguing that that's ambiguous. That is more your tougher case, okay? But I'll tell you in a moment why there's still hope if you've got that exclusion. So the strategies for handling these cases, and this is a gross simplification, but I'll go through kind of the strategy, okay? The strategy for these cases, and I've told my clients in every single one, whether you fall into bucket 1, 2, or 3, make a claim. Call your agent up. He's obligated to do it for you. Make a claim. Even if he tells you, no, there's no coverage, say, I understand, make the claim. He'll submit the claim for you, and 100% of the time right now, there'll be a denial that'll come back. There'll be a denial letter. It'll start with no physical damage or loss of property, and then it'll fall down into some contamination, pollutant, microorganism exclusion, okay? At that stage, what we're doing is we're writing more formal legal demands, for our clients, laying out what their damages are, what the basis under the law, citing Florida statutes, et cetera, and making a more formal, strong demand for the policy and explaining again the rules of construction and why this isn't ambiguous. Number 3 is what's called a declaratory judgment action. And in that article I referenced, that is what's already happened in New Orleans. A lawyer has gotten out front and filed a declaratory judgment action. And all that means is he's asking the judge to declare that this policyholder has insurance. Now, it doesn't say how much he or she or the business may be entitled to, but seeking a judicial ruling that there is coverage. I've talked to several lawyers at the national level about this strategy. The danger is, quite frankly, you get in front of the wrong judge. And you get in front of a judge that all of a sudden declares it's not, and then that precedent gets starting to spread around. So there is an effort to make sure that the right courts hear this, for lack of better words. And so that the declaratory judgment actions are being won so that then the precedent, the momentum for the policyholder begins to take shape versus the wrong momentum, okay? Then there's also, if you, part of a declaratory judgment action can be a breach of contract action. That requires litigation. We file a lawsuit on behalf of our clients, and we say that, basically, an insurance contract is a contract. It is, insurance policy is a contract for a premium. You bought coverage, and that the insurance company, by refusing to pay, has breached that contract, and now litigation follows. And that's number 1. That's the first type of case. Number 2, they kind of follow about the same thing, except when you get to the clear virus exclusion. The ambiguous exclusion, same thing. You're going to make the claim. Upon denial, we're going to make a formal demand. And then with respect to the declaratory judgment actions, because the ambiguity, we need the momentum to make sure that pollutant, that contaminant, that microorganism, we need the right courts strategically to make sure that ambiguity is being resolved in favor of the policyholders. There are good venues, there are bad venues, and so pretty much need to trust your lawyer as to which venue you're in and whether it's right to file declaratory judgment in that particular venue or instead wait. Yes, I can. 2 minutes, I can wrap up. So that's it. The last bucket is the clear virus exclusion. There is still hope, still make the demand, but the restaurant industry, representatives from restaurant industries are in negotiations with politicians, attorneys general, to hopefully put together a fund similar to the BP fund or similar to the post 9/11 fund, that then restaurants with virus exclusions can still litigate or make a demand into that fund and get a portion of their losses covered. Okay, thank you. That's all I have right now. If anyone does, I think my website, my email is on there. If anyone has any questions or concerns or just wants to know which bucket they fall into with respect to their policy, send me an email. We're all standing by. Krista Collins is sitting right here next to me. We'll review it, personally call you. Thank you so much, Tina. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. And Ingrid, I love Whistle Pig Rye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Really appreciate it. I want to apologize to everybody. We went over a little bit, but I'm going to wrap it up right now. just kind of in summary, you just need to look for some from, through all the resources that you can possibly find to get the relief that you need. I found that you can even get relief if you start calling your creditors, your insurance company. Right now, most insurance companies are giving credits for car insurance because your car's not on the road. So call them, ask them. They may give you some money back. And again, call your finance companies, call your mortgage company, call everyone, and because they're being pretty helpful and we've found pretty good results. So I found that, let's see, one more thing I just want to remind you that we are going to do, as I said before at the beginning, this is a series, and our next one will be next week. Is it scheduled for next Thursday at the same time, correct?
I'll confirm.
Okay. And that webinar will basically be about where we go from here, post figuring out where your finances are and where you're getting your relief funds. Now it's time to start thinking about what you're going to do with your business when it all ends and when you can open again. So we're going to talk about issues that you need to think about in advance in planning to open your business once we get through this crisis. So, and if anybody has any questions, please contact us. I think our contact information should be all over the slides. If anyone needs any help reviewing their lease, you can call Fletcher Fischer Pollack, and you can talk to any one of us, Tina Fischer, that's me, Lee Fletcher, or Ann Pollack. We can all help you. I thank everybody for your attendance today, and I hope the information we provided was helpful. Have a good day.
Do we have any questions?
Oh, anybody have any questions? I forgot about that. Sorry.
So Roger asked a question, where will we find the link to webinar posting? So those that you were registered, and we do have you registered, Roger, we'll be following up via email. So that's where you can find that posting. We'll have all the links in there, summary of the slides, and the webinar recording if you are looking to follow that up. Yes? All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good day.